Hey, welcome in, folks. I'm your host, Jesse Moeller, and I am with Jeremy Schulman. Today, what we're talking about on Fantasy Football Universe Network? We're talking about running backs. So we're going to break those down here in a second as we drop this intro on you. All right. So, thank you all for joining us today. Today, we are talking about our 2024 running back pre-draft rankings with the rookies. There are a few guys that unfortunately did not make the cut. Pour one out for my guy, Bucky Irving, who was very high in the pre-draft process. And then the combine happened. We had to, kick him to the curb. There's also Isaac Garendo. There's a couple other guys that we are higher on in general, but just, we're only doing top 5 today. So only 5 guys can make the list. So we have 5 we're pretty bullish on. We had to edit some things because we were looking at our rankings and realizing our formatting was wrong. So we had to do a little shifting and fixing of the rankings because they were not properly formatted, right? So, it is what it is. Sometimes that's happened. But how are you feeling about this 2024 running back class, Jeremy?
Hey, listen, we're a professional operation, right? So we do things, we keep it classy here. But this particular class is not as classy as we'd like, right? I think that's all the talk we hear all the time in the fantasy industry is the running back class isn't as good as previous years. I'm sure there's a couple diamonds in the rough here that we can sort out, and if you pick the right guy, you can definitely get a value. And get a steal and get, hopefully an RB2, hey, maybe even an RB1 for years to come. So we're going to sort through it, see who's worth, those actual early second round picks, or maybe even super late first round picks, depending on where they get drafted to, and try and give you a little bit more insight into our top 5 and how we think it's going to shake out.
Yeah, it's gonna be a fun show. I'm excited to talk about these guys. We are pretty in consensus with these guys. The names might shift a little bit, but you look across, it seems we all kind of seamlessly all determined who the top 5 are. There may be one name on here that's a little iffy, just depending on if you like to live fast, the Ricky Bobby status, and if you want to go fast. But outside of that, let's get into these rookies, shall we? So, As you see, here's our top 5 rookies. We're gonna drop them. And one sec. And if anybody is curious who our first guy is, you might think it's Jonathan Brooks, right? But the shocker is actually not. It's Mr. Trey Benson, the running back out of Florida State. So, why do you think he is our top ranked running back of all the running backs we could pick? What about Trey Benson to you, Jeremy, is like, yeah, that's the top guy of the class. He offers these things that make him head and shoulders above the best.
Yeah, I mean, Benson for me is my top guy. I think I first started entertaining the idea maybe a little over a month ago when SC was adamant. Trey Benson is my number 1 guy. And I think almost all of us were like, I don't know. But then for me, it was all like downhill snowball effect for me from there. I went in, I dove into his tape. I mean, the tape all looked really solid. I'm giving him a little bit of a pass on, working in that Florida State offense with Jordan Travis and that injury he was dealing with. There was a lot of tumult there, but when Benson had the ball, he looked great. He hit the hole. He's got the speed that you want, but even more so than the tape, which was good, was his performance at the combine. I really love the fact that not only was he fluid and solid in all the running drills, but in the pass catching drills, he also showed that he could, he had all the chops that you need. He's not an elite pass catcher, but he's definitely a serviceable pass catcher. I'd call him a good with good hands pass catcher, which is what you want to see. He's capable of being a 3-down back. Whether or not he'll be utilized as that, we'll see. But he's certainly plenty fast enough. He's got all the chops that you want to see, and I just think he's the most well-rounded back at the size you want to see with the speed you want to see in this class.
Yeah, I think he's that prototypical running back where if you're in a lab and you're cooking up as a scientist, he's the type of guy you're going to build. You're like, all right, he's going to be 6 feet tall. He's going to be around 215, 220 pounds. Does everything you want. Oh, yeah, guess what? And he's a burner on top of it, right? Yeah. And I know we get into the vision concerns, and sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. If you talk to certain film people, they'll say, well, actually, he was trying to do certain things. And this is where, like, when you're breaking down film, it really helps to know what you're looking at, because you might think he missed the hole. Realistically, it could have been a misassignment from, like, the guard, and it opens up a different hole. He's trying to go that way. So sometimes film doesn't always – it's basically in the eye of the beholder when you're looking at film. So you have to be very careful when you're watching, like, these film if you don't know what you're looking at. So for Benson, he just offers like what you're talking about. I think he's probably like among this group, like it's him and Brooks are the best pass catchers for me. Personally, I prefer Brooks as a pass catcher, but the upside and like he's not dealing with an injury, so like we don't have to worry about the ACL concerns. I think if it wasn't an ACL concern, I think the RB1 discussion would be a lot closer between Brooks and Benson. But like he's a prototypical size, 4'3". Like this guy's a burner. He offers the package, and he can play all downs, and this is what we want. Where like would you be more like what's his dream landing spot for you? Because I think for me personally, I would love to see him in the Chargers, and I think that would be a lot of fun. But is there somewhere for you to see where you'd be like, that's a great spot for him to land?
Yeah, it's Dallas. I think he's just that Jerry Jones kind of style back. He's the Zeke mold, maybe not nearly as physical freaky as Zeke was when he first came out, with all the high expectations that he lived up to in his first few years. But he's just got that Dallas feel to me for him. That's not really compelling analysis, but I think if you look at the last couple of years and what Tony Pollard was, he was never the bigger guy. When you had Rico Dowdle taking carries back there, right, he was looking a bit more effective. I know the Dallas line is not what it was a couple of years ago, but at the same point, that offense is still able to move the ball, and if you can get someone who has that workhorse ability back there. I'm trying to think who else is on the Dallas roster of RBs at the moment. I know it's Deuce Vaughn. It's probably Dowdle and Malik.
Yeah, Malik Davis. Yeah, it's exactly no shade to those guys, right?
Davis, right. Yeah. So, whoever goes to Dallas, I think we're in agreement that that's really going to be the ideal landing spot for a running back. But if it's one of these workhorse guys, one of these top three guys, really, that we're going to be discussing here in a minute, it's going to be really intriguing. And if it's Benson, I'm kind of all in.
Yeah, I think there's like any one of those spots, like that sounds great. You could put him in Cincinnati, and I think he's good enough to earn the job as much as I like Zach Moss. Like, I think he offers you more than a Zach Moss does, right? He might not be like their pass catching similarities are kind of similar because they're not the best catchers in the world, but they're capable pass catchers. And when you're dealing with the likes of Rico Dowdle, Malik Davis and those guys, like I don't think you need to be the best pass catcher in the world. Like you can still earn that role. And it comes down to competition. So, yeah, I think Benson's the most likely of all of these guys in this class to see the workload that we're looking for fantasy. And honestly, that's what we care about. It's like you get the work. That's how you score the fantasy points. So, yeah, we went back and forth on it. But overall, like Benson's our RB1. Do you want to move on to our RB2?
Yeah, just a quick note about Benson and all of these guys, right? Landing spot really is going to matter, especially for these RBs who are not like they're super freak athletes at the moment. There's no Saquon Barkley, there's no Jahmyr Gibbs or Bijan in this class, right? So because of that, landing spot matters more. And if you're putting a guy in a wide open backfield, great. If you're putting him, like you said, regardless of who it is, if it's one of these next few guys, if it's Benson in Cincinnati, where he's got to contend with a professional running back in Zach Moss, or up and coming Chase Brown, who's going to steal some touches and be utilized in packages, that's gonna ding their value because they're not going to be able to step in and take that workload on immediately. So it's just a consideration. I'd be much higher on Benson in Dallas than in Cincy. If he went to Cincy, great. But then are we talking about, a Zach Charbonnet situation where, he's sitting behind a guy for a couple of years? And in Charbonnet's case, right, it could be his entire career because those guys are just a year apart. So you never know.
Yeah, with Walker, it's a different story because Walker is like a very unique running back. And I think if you're looking for just a freak athlete, like Garendo is the guy you got to go chase. Like if that's what you're really looking for, not necessarily like good running back, you just want the guy that's like built in the lab completely. That's Garendo. Like we're trying to get good running backs who are athletic on top of it. Yeah. No shade to Garendo, but like there's a lot left on the bone there for being as athletic as you are. I'm like, dude, I need more. I don't know what happened, like why it was not so good for you, but yeah. And to your point, yeah, situation Hollies and the competition, like how these guys fit into the right scheme on top of it, that is also another thing. Like they need to fit in the right scheme because you need to be running the right system. And if it doesn't work out, like you'll find that out. And this happened with Zach Moss back in Buffalo. Like he perfectly example of that. Like he was a terrible fit in that system. He goes to Indianapolis and it's like, oh, he's a good running back. Shocker. So that matters way more for these running backs than it does say like right. So let's go to our second guy, the guy who is coming off the ACL tear. That's Mr. Jonathan Brooks, running back out of Texas. It is surprising that they're the same size to me. Like you check the weigh-ins, and I had to do a double take. I was like, Brooks seems smaller than Benson, It's just more how he carries his body weight and like how he looks. But they're like identical size. And I'm like, oh, so interesting. And like if you would have told me going into the combine, I'm like, yeah, Brooks is gonna come in, like he's gonna be a little bit shorter, way less. And I'm like, nope, the exact same size. I'm like, okay, all right, I need to readjust some things because the Phil's line on that. But what's your appeal for you for Brooks? Like, what does he bring to the table that separates him from everybody else?
Well, we said this at the beginning, a month and a half ago when we started all of this. If there were no injury issues with Jonathan Brooks, he's the far and away RB1. I don't think that's anything that's groundbreaking. A lot of people, I think, would agree with that take. Mm-hmm. But we have the injury concern. What's he going to look like now that he's coming off of this? What we don't have with Benson is a similar situation, is that injury concern, because he's already had the injury in his freshman year. He came back and now he's doing those things that he was always doing, developed and matured into a capable back. If Brooks goes that same route, which we hope and expect that he will, he could very well end up the RB1, but I think we're just baking a little bit of that into the cost here. But in terms of Brooks, the runner, he's very capable of running inside. Like you said, he seems a little bit smaller. He's a little bit shiftier, right? He's got a little bit more fluidity in his movement, but he's able to run inside. He's able to run around the corner. He's a great pass catcher. He was in a decent offense. He made it. He was the engine that made it run. I have no issues with Jonathan Brooks at all. I think he's very capable. I'm just hedging a little bit. He's my RB, I think, 3. My RB3, but I'm hedging there just because of the injury.
Yeah. He's still my RB1. It's like, this is the one guy that I'm higher on the most. I have him at the 112 of picks right now. But like, I get it. Like, it totally makes sense. If you're worried about the injury, like I 100% get it. And I think what it comes down to for me is if he gets the draft capital, that means the team is going to be they're confident enough, like post injury, like, you know what? We don't care. Because like, I think what he actually does is he brings the most for like a 3-down skill set. Like, he could do everything. Like, he can initiate tough. He can run inside. He doesn't have the home run speed that Benson has. And that's the difference between the two. Because if you're looking for a home run hitter, Brooks isn't going to pop off 80-yard runs. That's just not what he's going to do. Benson offers that skill set where he could take any touch of the house because he is that athletic. From a true athleticism standpoint, he's not the same athlete as Benson. Like, few guys are in this class. Like, Benson's pretty freaky. But Brooks is very much a plus athlete. He's capable. He's a good pass catcher. So if you're looking for a guy that could do everything for an offense, this is the guy you're going to want to target. I know, like, my ranking's a little bit higher on him. It's just, I'm waiting to see what happens with draft capital. If he goes in round 3 or round 4, we're going to push him back. Whoever of these guys, they're all so close for me personally. Like, they're going to shift between this group just because there is no true generational talent. Like, there's a lot of guys that have good qualities, maybe missing a few pieces. But for me, like, I just like a lot of the skill set Brooks brings. So if he gets in any one of those day 2 capital of a good offense, like, I'm just going to say I'll be in. And I'll be like, let's go. We'll see how this goes. Maybe it could burn me. But personally, I'm all for that. I think the Cincinnati one's really interesting. Like, we're kind of under the implication he's going to be injured already. So if he needs to take some time, let those guys in front of him work, and then he slowly earns some of that passing down work coming on the second half of the year, like, I'd be okay with that. But if you need instant production in this running back class, Brooks is probably not the guy you're going to want to target. So, target one of those other guys. Where do you think the best spot for him would be?
There's a lot of good options. I mean, I kind of like him in more of a functional offense like Tampa Bay, right? Mm-hmm. I know Rashad White had far too many touches. They've already come out and said they need a complement there. That's interesting to me because I think Brooks is good enough to eventually take over a majority of that role and beat out White. That's interesting. Or you can put him in a high-powered offense like Houston, and he can sit, maybe even the entire year, come back later in the year, and then really start to be the Jahmyr Gibbs to Mixon's David Montgomery in year 2, and then take over by year 3. So, somewhere where the offense is at least functional. Somewhere like Cleveland is wide open or Carolina is wide open, but there's a lot of question marks there still if that offense, if those quarterbacks and that offense is functional. So I'd prefer somewhere a bit more stable and established for him, where he can sit back and then grow into the role in 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I think if Carolina does draft a running back, like, that'll be sayonara for Miles Sanders. Like, that's kind of how that one sounds to me. So if you're Miles Sanders, if you're a shareholder of Miles Sanders, you're just hoping they'll draft a new one. It's like, all right, maybe it was just a really bad year. Newsflash, it's probably not. He's just not that good. But like we'll see where one of these guys lands. It could be. It's like this is what we're talking about. It's going to be rocky. Like some of these guys are just going to get kicked out, and someone's going to come up that we're not expecting either the Capitol. Maybe my previous love, who has scored me with his terrible combine, Bucky Irving, he gets the draft capital, and I'm skyrocketing him back in. So we'll see how it all goes for these guys. So let's jump in.
We should mention quickly about Brooks that he's the one most talked about going to Dallas. So if he does go to Dallas, I think that's an instant great spot for him. He's not, once healthy, he's not getting many touches stolen by Rico Dowdle and Deuce Vaughn, coach's son, and it's just not happening, right? So he has the potential to be a true workhorse if they take him. I don't know what else they would do. Maybe they take another back later. But once healthy,
Zeke off the free agency, maybe.
However it shakes out, if they take him, they'd probably, I don't know where they pick in the second, but it'll probably have to be like late second or early third, wherever they pick him. And if they take him, whatever other route they go, he's locked in. I mean, as soon as he's healthy, he's locked in. He's going to see all he can handle.
Yeah, that'd be a heck of a lot of fun. Because if you look at, like, the interesting thing with Brooks, though, I'll maybe on the next guy. If you look at his stats compared to Bijan last year, they're eerily similar. The things he was doing is replicating Bijan almost to the nth degree. So, like, he's really good. I think he was just undersold because he was behind, 2 pro-level NFL running backs last year, the year before that. So that's why he's a redshirt sophomore. He didn't get a play. Like, it's Bijan Robinson, and then there's Roschon Johnson. Like, you know what? Sometimes running backs are just better than depth chart, and that's what happened with Brooks, and he showed it out last year. So, wherever he goes, I think he's going to be an addition to a running back room. So I'm excited to see where he goes.
Yep.
Now, our third guy gets really interesting. It's another guy coming off of a ACL tear back when he was a freshman, and that's Mr. Marshon Lloyd. As you can see, he's a little bit shorter. He's a lot stockier, but there's a lot to like about Lloyd personally. Now that he's post ACL injury and all of that, he looks back to being the runner he was coming out because he was a premium prospect going to South Carolina. I think he was like a top 5 running back in his class. Why don't you what do you like so much about Marshon Lloyd that makes him our 3rd overall ranked running back? Because I think our rankings are back to back on this guy. Like, I think you're 15 and I'm 16 on him.
Yeah, he looks. He just has a really good sense of running. Can hit the edge. He's got that speed, which you want to see. But he also showed good patience. I know Matt Cooper from Dynasty Nerds had this amazing tweet, which was totally valid, where he was like, I think he said elite blindness on Marshon Lloyd, and showed a play where he just and then I think he proceeded to show a couple other plays like in subsequent tweets about him just completely missing holes, and so that's not good. But I didn't see a ton of that in the limited tape that I watched. I trust Matt, but at the same time, if that's not a huge part of his game, if he can read holes properly enough, see where they open up, then I think everything else is there, right? He's got the speed you want. He's got the pass catching you want. He was the guy who actually shocked me the most, being able to, at the combine, being able to run out, catch those passes like smoothly, in transition, turn up field. You just didn't see a ton of that because of Caleb Williams at USC. He never did a ton of that at South Carolina either. But he's got that in his bag. So I like that about him. This is another guy, these top 3 guys that we have, I believe all 3 of them can be workhorse backs in the NFL. In the age of the dying workhorse, I don't know that they will be, but they have at least that potential. And that's when I want to see when I'm drafting my fantasy running back.
Yeah, if they go to a running back room such as like Dallas, that's pretty barren at this moment, like they could earn a hefty portion of touches. The interesting thing with Lloyd is like his yards per reception last year were insanely high. It was like 17 yards per catch last year, right? And I was like, what the heck's going on? Because it was well off of his career averages. So I don't know like what necessarily was different, but you watch the tape, it's like nobody's around him, and he's getting 17 yards. I'm like, okay, or he shakes one guy and he gets a bunch of yards. So I mean, he looks good. But the thing about him, like watching him run, it's like you see that and you're like, whoa, baby, like it literally is like just a freight train, and he is moving fast. And I was very impressed when I watched his tape. I was like, because you heard about him, and then you jump the tape, and you're like, oh, this is nice. Hello, like I like what I'm seeing here. So yeah, once I watched his tape, I was like, okay, yeah, this guy's an NFL running back, 100%. And yeah, to your point, the vision is like very questionable at times because you wonder what he's seeing that we're not seeing when you're watching the All-22 tape. Because like we talk about missed holes, and yeah, I remember. Funny you brought the Matt Cooper thing. Like him and Damian Pierce, the DP NFL guy, they kind of got into it about what they saw on the tape and how he disagreed with Matt. So like Matt went back and watched it. Like it was just fun. Like you saw 2 film guys that we both kind of trust, and they're like arguing over it. And I'm like, all right, if you guys don't know what the hell you're watching, like what am I supposed to do? Right?
Exactly. Exactly.
So yeah, it was interesting. And I was like, well, I played running back. This is what I assumed it was, but I don't know what I mean. So it's just there's a lot to like with Lloyd. I do wonder how much of the receiving work is translatable to the NFL level, because there are some things he does. You're kind of like, okay, maybe if not, but like he's tough. He runs hard. He does a lot of things good. It's just once he gets into the open field, like he's dynamite, and that's the thing. Like he gets past the line of scrimmage, it's like, all right, this guy's going to get some yards. And you love the compact build. Like we'll talk about Corum here in a little bit. Newsflash, he made our top 5. He's a lot smaller. He's like 205. So like these guys are the same size. Lloyd just gives you an extra 15 pounds. You don't have to worry about the wear and tear. And he's just a physical freak like as well. So you'll notice a lot of these guys are all like plus athletes. I don't think there's anyone that we're worried about their athleticism concerns. Those guys like Estime, like Bucky Irving, were kind of like, all right, sorry, we'll see you later. You did not fortunately make the list. But yeah, I think it's more likely that he like. I've heard people talking to him in the Chargers, and I think that makes a lot more sense because they want to ground and pounds, and then you're not heavily reliant on his skill set as a pass catcher. It'll be there. He's passable, but he's not a plus. Like we're not talking like Jahmyr Gibbs or anybody like that level. We're talking about a guy that can get it done if you need it to get done. So I think, then that's going to be really exciting. So if he goes to the Chargers, like I'm going to be firing him up. It'll be a lot of fun because he does have his injury concerns, but he's past it. So overall, like I think like we get to that mid-second round, like I'm hammering Marshon Lloyd there if he ends up with the Chargers. Realistically, whoever goes to the Chargers or Dallas is probably going to that first round. So just unfortunately is what it is with this class because it's so flat from 1 to 9 fast forward. So
if they end up in, let's see, any of these guys, but let's talk about Lloyd for a second. If he ends up in Arizona or in New York on the Giants or in Buffalo, are these plus landing spots for you?
So the thing with Buffalo, what worries me is James Cook's there, and James Cook is going to be there for a few years. Yeah. And he's like James Cook has been one of the most efficient rushers in the NFL. So I don't know how that's really going to work out if they're going to shift his role into the passing down, even though they really don't want him to play passing down. I think that was interesting, but yeah, I think him sitting like we're earning work in year 1, even if he is behind a good back, like you talked about the Giants. Who's the first place that you mentioned? I can't remember again. Arizona, yeah, like with James Conner. As long as he's able to earn work and you see that he's able to take away from James Conner, then I'm not going to be worried. If he goes there and he's just stuck behind James Conner getting 0 touches, then you're like, all right, it's probably not going to happen. So I don't mind these guys going to these spots as long as there's a path in year 2. Like we talk about them kind of earning more work as the season goes on. Second half, they come on strong. They're earning about 40% of the snaps and work. Like I'm fine with that. Because then year 2, you get them. They move on from James Conner. Then he gets all of that work and go from there. So depending on the landing spot with all of these guys, I will be in, I will be out. Like we talked about Detroit. If anybody goes to Detroit, just like, it's nice knowing you. It ain't going to happen. There are certain spots like Chicago, just a muddy backfield. I don't really want to see anybody there because even if you do like get to the second of the depth chart, how many touches are you going to get? Right. So like there are certain spots where it's just going to be like, let other people take these guys because no matter what, people love these guys.
And to that point, I would love to see Marshon Lloyd in Green Bay, but it's muddy, right? So I think he's a really good fit there. I think he's probably can be what they're looking for in AJ Dillon, but AJ Dillon is back, right? He's going to take some touches just because he's the vet. It's over for Dillon in fantasy, but if he ends up there, I'll be like, oh, that makes a ton of sense, and I'm over it. I won't want much to do with Lloyd in fantasy in that case.
Yeah, the weird thing with Jacobs' contract is it's only a 1-year contract. Like it's guaranteed for this year. So theoretically, you could talk yourself into, all right, he takes the work from AJ Dillon. He's the backup, right? Because like AJ Dillon just has not been very good this year. And then they move on from Josh Jacobs after this year, go with Marshon Lloyd. I think it's a very unlikely scenario, but there's a way to at least talk yourself into it, right? Where if he's behind someone where it's like Saquon, where it's actually like all years are basically guaranteed, it's like, all right, you're not playing, my friend. Like you need another injury or something. So that's a little different story. So
very true.
Yeah. But it'd be a lot of fun. He'd be a good addition to that offense. So, I like that for the NFL more than fantasy.
Yeah, agree.
All right. So now it gets a little interesting. We're going to jump to our 4th guy, Blake Corum, who seems pretty divisive. Like I know people, like if people really, and the Michigan fans, like they love this guy. Yeah. The guys outside of Michigan are kind of like, and I'm kind of on the fence with him. How do you feel about Blake Corum having him as our 4th ranked running back? And are you in at that price with him?
I might be. It's going to really depend where he lands. Right now, he's my RB6. I think I got to move him up to RB5 at least. The talk is really interesting about Blake Corum, but I think you can probably Sharpie marker him into Los Angeles at this point. I mean, how are Jim Harbaugh and company not going to go get their guy when all they have in the backfield is Gus Edwards and whoever the heck couldn't take over the touches from Austin Eckler last year in that ridiculous season? So, we know they're bringing somebody in, right? They didn't do nearly enough. They have to draft one, if not two running backs to that team, especially with the way that we assume they're going to want to run. And Blake Corum just makes far too much sense for them. It's a familiarity. Harbaugh is going to go get his guy. I 100% believe in that narrative. If that's the case, yeah, wheels up for Blake Corum. He's going to absolutely crush, and they're going to give him, I think, 200 touches in his first year, easy.
Yeah, like if you're just going to just load him up with touches, I would love that fit. And, Jim Harbaugh knows him better than anybody else. So Harbaugh's like, that's my guy. We'll go get him. If he lands there, the community is going to love it. My whole concern with him is he has to hit right out of the gate. You can't wait a year because he's already 24, right? So you don't get the years of grievance you with the other guys. No, he's already in that mid-range age where running backs are hitting their peak. Like, this is the whole thing with him. So this was kind of with Najee, except we're a little bit older, like when he came out a few years ago, where it's like, all right, Najee's competing for RB1. It's like, all right, if he's going to be RB1, he's got to hit and hit early. So if you're taking Corum, you cannot wait. He needs to hit for you now. So if you do draft him and he's not hitting right away, like, you could always just pivot off of him. I'm sure somebody will buy him, but the age thing does worry me because you just get a short shelf life for him. Like, that second contract is not going to be as valuable. Like, by the time he hits the second contract, he'll be like 28 years old. And like, we're talking about that, right? We run that through. It's like, man, he'll be 28. It's like, yeah, that's the problem. So I think that's the one thing really working against him, just because he's older. He did have a significant knee injury. He seemed to be more back to who he was before that. This is another guy, like, almost basically all these running backs seem like they've all been injured with a serious knee injury. But with Corum specifically, like, there were question marks if he came back. And he came back and he proved it. And like, I saw it. I'm a Washington fan. I saw that firsthand. Like, him, those two guys just tear us up. So yeah, that was not too much fun to watch, but newsflash, Michigan's really good that things happen like that. I know Aaron was very happy. He was watching that game. He was thrilled about it. But yeah, for me personally, I don't know. I kind of like left wanting a little bit more from Blake Corum because his missed tackles, force, things of that nature are not as high as I'd like to see from a guy who's strictly viewed as more of a rusher. So I do wonder if he goes to, like, say he goes to the Chargers, right? Like, how good the offensive line is going to be. And hopefully, they take that first pick. They take ideally, they get a couple of linemen. They shore up the offensive line. And then it looks a lot better, and it helps out Herbert and all of those guys. So I think the Chargers is a really good landing spot. It's just they need to solidify everything else around it, too, because they're very much in flux. So that's one of the building blocks. If they put the rest of the pieces together, it's like, all right, the offense will look really nice. Corum gets 200 touches. Gus Edwards gets like 120, and then you get a couple more of the other guys, and it's a fun offense, right? So
Gus Edwards had over 200 touches last year, my friend. So don't sleep on the bus.
I don't think he's going to get 200, unless he gets an injury, because that is just poor Dobbins, Keaton Mitchell, everybody's going down over there.
Listen, they don't have anybody else to give the ball to at the moment. So, but even if it's not the Chargers, right? Corum needs a situation like that. He needs a pounder, right? Someone like a Gus Bus who can just carry the load, who can be kind of the normal first and second down guy. And it's not that Corum is going to be a third down back, but he needs to be kind of a spell back at first. He needs to kind of swap in on some series, right? And be able to not take on a full workload, because I think you could run into a situation where, let's say Corum is in Dallas and they treat him like they treated Tony Pollard last year. That's going to be a situation where I think it's good for his fantasy value, but for his reality value, that's a concern, because you're going to be overworking him, if not kind of mixing in other backs. And then you run into a situation where, he was the pounder in the Michigan offense and he was fine, but he was running behind behemoth offensive linemen in the best offense in all of college football. And, he was just kind of diving ahead and getting a couple of yards at the goal line pretty easily. Now in the NFL, that's going to be a lot more difficult. And as you referenced earlier, and as everyone can see here, he's 5'8", 205. So he's, not even close to Tony Pollard's size, trying to do Tony Pollard things. I don't think that's going to happen. So
it's going to be tough.
He needs to be, he's like a first and second down roll guy.
It's weird.
He just doesn't have the size for it. So I just think all the moves that Los Angeles has already made, bringing in Gus, clears the path for Blake Corum to go there. But yeah, they're going to need to draft another back, I think, and, just someone to complement him.
Well, yeah, like he's basically J.K. Dobbins size. He's like 2 pounds lighter or whatever it is. But the thing about J.K. Dobbins, like you watched him and I was like, this dude is different. And he didn't have the serious injury coming out that Corum already dealt with, or didn't have the concerns. I just think Dobbins is one of the favorite running backs I've seen like the past 5 years coming out of college. Like I watched that guy and I was like, holy shit, this is incredible. I'm not there with Corum, even pre-injury. I don't think he's that good of a rusher. And like my whole concern is like he's very much a grinder. He's not going to be like the pass catcher in offense. And to your point, like pass protection is an issue. And if you don't trust him in pass protection, we see this with James Cook. Like you better be a damn good efficient running back and limited touches. Like he could be in that Buffalo type situation, right? Where he's getting partial work. It's just, does he get the goal line work? And then you have all of these issues where James Cook was super efficient. And I love James Cook, but like there are certain aspects of his game, like they just don't trust him with. So I'm curious to see how that works out, especially if he doesn't end up like in Los Angeles, because if he doesn't end up in Los Angeles, he doesn't have that connection to Harbaugh. It kind of changes a little bit and seeing how the offensive views him. So I think the draft's really important for all these guys, but particularly Corum more than the rest of them, because he needs to go into a good situation where they like count on him to be the early down grinder. He gets that work, he's efficient, and he can build it off of there. So someone who's a good pass catcher, I think like actually like you talked about Tampa Bay, pairing him to be the early down grinder with Rachaad White, I think works really well. It would suck for Rachaad White, but like he's just a better rusher than Rachaad White is. So I think a situation like that is a good situation for him, even though initially we'll probably be like, oh, that sucks. Like he won't have the ceiling, but he'll at least be fantasy viable in this situation. Like a guy you can have RB2, RB3. So there are ways like we can get this to work. But yeah, man, he's just old, and like that's just the thing that sucks with him. Like that's my whole concern. I'm like,
yeah, and we have all of these concerns about Blake Corum, and still he's our consensus RB4. So it should tell you, even though we have a guy on staff, it should tell you that there's not much kind of like left here after the big top three, and we're just kind of looking for traits. In Corum's case, I think it's kind of the JJ McCarthy argument, except we saw a lot more of Corum than we've seen of McCarthy. He's less of a mystery box, but he did carry the load in the nation's best offense. You can't take that away from him. He was pretty good around the goal line. You can't take that away from him. Can it work at the next level? That's the mystery box that you have to kind of figure out and solve for yourself. An NFL team is going to, give him a shot. It just depends where he goes, what they already have in place, and what scheme they're looking to run. If he goes to a pass-heavy scheme, I think that's going to be a bit of a knock to his value because he's not necessarily that guy. If he goes to a run-heavy scheme, as long as he's not behind an established guy like a Saquon or whatever, he's not necessarily like run-heavy
Derrick
scheme.
Henry in Baltimore, Henry, like that,
yeah. Although that's interesting, right? I don't hate that spot for Corum, but at the same time, I don't know. Is he better than Keaton Mitchell?
I mean, he's going to be on the field at least. We know that. Like we don't know when Keaton Mitchell's getting back, unfortunately. So, yeah, I think this photo is like a really good illustration of him because he wins pad level every time. Like that's how he runs. Like he runs
so
low.
He's short.
He's short, and he also gets down low too. So he wears on defenders because he's so compact, and I think that works really well for him. Like I'm not saying he's a bad running back. I think he's a good running back. It's just like we have question marks about him, and like him, I probably have the most question marks about him than I do the rest of the top 5 guys. So like that's my whole concern with him. But like we talk about all these guys, landing spots going to be key. So Corum could be like my RB8 or 9, like towards the end of it if he ends up in a bad spot. If he gets a really good spot, I might push him up to RB3. Like it just all depends. Like this is what I'm saying. Like it's so in flux. I get it. People are like, you gotta bet on your guys beforehand. And I'm like, dude, the situations in this draft class, all these guys are so similar. Like it's going to drastically change their value.
Oh yeah.
All right, let's go to our last guy in the top 5, and that will be this guy's pretty interesting. Like I'm not gonna lie, I don't know how to basically describe the Jaylen Wright experience until you watch the tape of Jaylen Wright, and then you're like, all right, turbo boosters engaged, let's go, and he's absolutely cruising. But the way I described him, he's a bat out of hell, like because he's not in control, like he's flying down the field. But it reminds me of the Mighty Ducks where they're like trying to stop on their skates and they can't. That's kind of Jaylen Wright. You watch him run. So like it's just like a wild experience watching him run. He's our top 5 guy. Why don't you sell us on what is like the good things that you like so much about Jaylen Wright?
Speed, and more speed. I mean, Tennessee used him right. I mean, they let him kind of just operate on the boundaries. The way he was used, I'm going to be very clear about this. I'm not making a comp. I'm just saying the way he was used reminds me of the way that Miami uses Devin Achane. because they get him on the boundary, they get him in space, they let him move, and give him the ball where he can operate. And Jaylen Wright needs to find a similar situation where they can just get him on the boundary, get him in space, and let him move with the ball. I don't know if there's a ton of spaces like that in the NFL at the moment where there's an opening. Certainly you don't want to see him in a situation like, where there's an established guy like in Detroit with a Jahmyr Gibbs, but like a Los Angeles Rams would be an interesting spot for him, just because he's going to be your home run threat. And as much as I would love to see this guy touch the ball 250 times, I don't think anybody wants to see this guy touch the ball 215 times, because he's more of an Achane talent as well, where you got to give him limited touches and he has to live off efficiency. The thing is, I think this guy can live off efficiency, and he can be kind of your fantasy-wise Achane light, hopefully kind of settling in that mid to later RB2 range for a couple of years for you.
Yeah, I literally don't know how to tell you how frustrating watching the Tennessee offense is, because that shit is not NFL offense like at all. The stuff they're doing, they're lining everything out wide. He's running through these giant holes. So like, if you're not efficient running back in Tennessee offense, like you have no shot in the NFL. Like I'm just saying that right now. And he was extremely efficient, but like trying to project that stuff forward is incredibly difficult, because you watch what Tennessee's doing. It's not NFL stuff. Like they do stuff completely different. So they're spreading their little linemen out wide. They're doing weird things, and they have like 3 down linemen and maybe 5 guys in the box. And it's like, all right, Jaylen Wright's all right, cool. They also take this and go. What worries me is just like his inability to kind of decelerate and accelerate in space. Like it's not there, even though he's fat. Like he's super fast. We saw this at the combine. The guy blazes. So I worry about him getting like past the second level. But yeah, like if you're looking for speed and like athleticism and a guy that can take the house call, like Jaylen Wright offers a lot. He's more of a mystery box, because I don't know how much of that is his skill set, and I don't know how much of that is the Tennessee scheme. And like we kind of come into this with the Tennessee offense every year with these guys, because they do weird stuff that's not translatable to NFL. So this is the whole, like we did this with what's the wide receiver's name that plays for the Giants right now? That I'm blanking on, that one that blended off. Yeah, we did this with Jalen Hyatt, and we were like, is that going to work? Because he basically had free releases the entire time. Turns out it didn't work in year 1, but that offense was abysmal. So it's really, you can't blame Hyatt for that, because the Giants might be the worst offense again this year. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I struggle with like the best fit for Jaylen Wright. And like we talk about Achane in Miami. Miami's offense is literally built for what Devin Achane does. Yeah. I don't know necessarily the best fit for Wright. And this is my struggle personally with Wright. Like, there are traits that I like, and I watch him. I'm like, okay, that's good. That's good. Then I see something else, and I'm like, dude, I don't know what to do with that. But like you said, he's patient. He's more than like Corum's kind of a pass protection issue. He's better than Corum in pass protection. Yeah, he could do that for you, and he can kind of like we talk about these running backs. He's not the Jonathan Brooks of the passing game. Like he's the best one of the bunch, but like he could do enough where if you don't have a capable pass catcher, you could throw him in that role, and he can kind of. I don't think he's ever going to be a true like workhorse. By the way, like those guys are dying as it is. There's maybe like 5 of those guys in the league, right? So like he could play a part-time role and be an efficient back in an NFL offense. It's just, for him, like we talk about this with Corum, he's another guy like landing spot dramatically matters, right? Mm-hmm. Like if you put him behind 2 good running backs, like I think he's just going to be that tantalizing. Like we talk about Antonio Gibson, like he's going to be that type where like, man, the speed, the athleticism, it's all there. Just like something's missing. So I need him in like the perfect situation. He lands up with one of those good offenses, people are going to be very, very excited. And I personally, for me, like I'm worried the cost is going to be too high. Where people are like, all right, he's the RB1 in this offense, and I'm like, let me see for a few weeks if that works out. Like I'm going to be more like trepidatious with it. For you, what's the spot where you're like, all right, if Wright goes there, I'm like, I'm in. Let's go, baby.
Like you said, it needs to be a spot where the cost doesn't rise like crazy. So I'm thinking of a place like Washington, right? Where you have kind of an aging Austin Eckler. He can learn from him. You have an established early down guy in Robinson. And then, he can start his career as kind of a functional, again, think about the usage of Achane when he was first getting on the field, right? You give him, 5 to 6 touches a game for a month at a time, and then you gradually increase his workload. We saw this work well last year with Keaton Mitchell as well. Jaleel McLaughlin had a similar ascension. Now we had some injuries with those guys because, what is the proper workload? But if he can work his way up and in his freshman year here, his rookie year, to 8 to 10 touches a game, I think that's only going to help increase his value. And, ideally he becomes like a Tajay Spears in year one type of usage, where he's seeing 10 to 12 touches a game. I also don't mind somewhere like the New York Giants, because, I mean, you mentioned them earlier, but that's a wide open backfield. We only have Devin Singletary back there and a bunch of bruisers, right? Why not put just a deep threat who you want to scheme up for? And Daboll, for all of the things that he does poorly as an NFL head coach, he does have the ability to scheme up some plays. And hopefully the Giants will be relatively healthy this season. We'll be able to see all those weapons work together and they can put together a functional offense. Can they do that with Daniel Jones or Drew Lock? Probably not. But, we'll see what happens there. But I do like the idea of him going to a spot where he can develop the way that some of those rookie backs did last year and work his way up to about 10 touches a game. And then, just build on that for years to come.
Yeah, I like that. I think another good spot, like, this obviously depends on Nick Chubb, but if, the Cleveland situation and Chubb kind of isn't that guy, I know people aren't really sold on Drum Ford, so like he can earn a role in year one and kind of like, like you talk about, slowly integrate himself into the offense. And if they trust him, he builds from there. So I think there is, like we talk about all these guys, there's a path for him in a situation like that. There are some landing spots where like, you know what? Like that's interesting. And like maybe the community might not be as high on it, but you kind of see the long-term potential. We're like, all right, he might not be the guy right away, but like there's a path for him to earn touches. And that's all we're chasing with these guys. Like, this is where I'm saying, like, if you're looking for true RB1s in this draft class, you're likely not going to find them. So, like, don't go with the 105, be like, all right, I need a running back. Just trade for a running back if you really want. Go trade for, your top young running back. There's plenty of good running backs in the league. You don't have to force these guys into those roles. In the second round, I'm all for throwing darts on these guys at the right landing spot. So if Jaylen Wright gets a spot with there, I'm like, you know what? I'll give it a shot. Because, like, we're wrong all the time. Like, we like to think we know all. We clearly do not. So he ends up in one of those positions, I'll be there. So that's kind of our top 5 in that order. Is there anyone outside of the top 5 for you personally that if they get the right landing spot, they're in a good situation, you're going to boost them into the top 5?
It's really tough, right? Because we talk about how important landing spot is with these guys. And after their top 3, there's not total consensus. There's a couple guys. So Braylon Allen is just a massive running back, right? He offers that. Unfortunately, it looks like he's probably more A.J. Dillon than we'd like him to be. But he has the potential not to be A.J. Dillon. So we'll have to see where he lands and if he can kind of develop and figure out how to use that size to his advantage. I like his potential, but again, it's a risk. A couple other guys, Dylan Lobby, I think is super interesting. He's the ultimate mystery box to me at the right RB position because he looks like he could hang with these guys at the Senior Bowl. He looks like, he's got the athleticism. He's a great pass catcher, but he played for, what was it, New Hampshire, right? So you just don't know what you're getting. But it's possible that you could be getting a third down role guy who could, carve out a significant role in his first year if he's truly as good as maybe some people might think he is, which is totally hedging. But I'm interested at least to see where he lands. And then, George Holani is another one from Boise State who I thought was interesting. If he lands somewhere, I think he's kind of this do-it-all back. The problem is he just doesn't have those elite traits. And ideally, I prefer a guy with elite traits than kind of a jack of all.
Yeah, for me, there's 2 guys that I seem to be higher in consensus, and it's Frank Gore Jr. I think he's actually a plus rusher. Might not be the best runner, like he's not the elite athlete, but like he's a guy that coaches are gonna love because he does everything right, he doesn't make mistakes, and he's actually a good physical runner. The other guy who I loved early on, like years ago, and like then I went back and studied his tape again this year, and I was like, you know what? It's still there. Like I don't know why everybody hates this guy. It's Will Shipley. I think he's the one guy of like outside of the top 5 we're talking about. Like he's the guy that can find himself in doing a lot of like getting a lot of touches, playing like the third down role, rushes. Like all of a sudden you look, he's got 15 touches in the game. I think he offers the most as far as like a 3-down skill set. Outside of a few of these guys, like he's up there. Like I know I'm way higher on him, and same thing with Gore. Like I look at the rankings, I'm like well above everybody else. I'm like, such is life. Like I personally prefer Shipley to Braylon Allen. Like I think there's more upside with that. It's just Braylon Allen's with Estim. Like I just don't trust either one of those guys. So we'll see. Like, you know, if we look back at this in 6 months and be like, oh man, I'm an idiot for thinking that. But, or you know what, you'd be right, and then you can just victory lap it all day. That's just kind of is what it is. So, but yeah, I think it shows you how just how unsure we are with these running back class, and just how so much still can change with the draft coming up.
I totally agree with you. Let me throw a few names at you here and just give me your briefest thoughts in 5 to 10 seconds. Ray Davis.
I don't know what to do with him. Legit, I'm like, he's a big boy. He can run. He can do some things, but like, I don't know if the NFL is going to like him. That's my biggest concern. Like, I don't think he offers enough upside, to tell you the truth.
Agree with that. Bucky Irving. Tell the people, Jesse.
Good God. The most fun tape you'll watch. Like, he's just a jitterbug, man. Yeah, he needs draft capital. Like, he's too small. He's too slow. And that's the whole thing. But like, if you look at his data and like everything he does, like his analytics is off the charts as a rusher. Like, it's nice. Like, if you want to take a dart throw on somebody like Bucky Irving, if he gets day 2 capital, I'm so back in. I just don't think he's going to get it. That's my biggest thing with him.
The combine was such a blow.
Reminds me of Kyron. It's like, goodness.
Audric Estime.
Quick feet. He's a big boy. He can get positive yards. It's just the speed's not there. But I think he's very much the plotter. Like, this is what I thought of Ramondre coming out. I was like, this guy's such a fucking plotter. Can't do anything. And then he shows up and he's like 30 pounds lighter. So, hey, Estimes, lose some weight. Get that speed going. Let's go. And you could be Ramondre 2.0. I don't think it's going to happen, but like, that's what we'll talk about something too.
Two words I'll say about Estime: thin quads. What? What? Why? No.
He's a big boy.
Get out of here. Big boy up top. He's got thin quads. Look at it. I mean, or don't. Who cares? Estime. He's off my board.
Bodybuilder for
you mentioned him earlier, Isaac Garendo.
Speed. Just speed. Like, it leaves a lot to be desired, though. You watch the tape, it does not match the combine performance, so I don't know the disconnect there. Maybe the Rutgers offense was atrocious. That was it. But there's just like, you're like, dude, you should have been more productive. And you know, if he gets draft capital, though, like, we'll give it a shot.
And last one I'll mention here now, and your boy who performed well during the season, but the combine was not so great. Dylan Johnson, make a pitch.
Yeah, he's a tough as nose rusher. Like, he can actually do pass protection. He can do a lot of everything. It's just the athleticism is not there. And that's the one thing I don't think it's going to translate for him, unfortunately. But like, he's a guy who could find a role in an offense and do like, get a couple touches and be a good guy in a running back room. It's just the injuries, the athleticism is just not there. And I think it's really going to cost him.
Yeah. Agree.
Pouring out. Sorry, Dylan. I love you.
All right, cool. So we're going to wrap this one up.
Yeah, let's wrap it up.
Nice. I'm going to pick an interesting fly outro, but that was awesome. So let's say this. Visit us at fantasyfootballuniverse.com. Check us out on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it these days. Check us out on YouTube. Check us out on Instagram. We are trying to be everywhere. We are live weekly. We are running mocks. We have video and written content on our website of roughly 100 top rookie prospects from this upcoming draft season, and more content coming to you daily pretty much at this point. So once again, for Jesse, for myself, this has been the Fantasy Football Universe, our review of the top 5 running backs. We will see you next time.